is interpretation. A poem well read is a poem well understood. In this podcast, brought to you by the Literary Life Podcast, poet Thomas Banks will help you increase your love and understanding of poetry. Each short season of weekly episodes will be connected by a particular theme or focus, and in addition to modeling good reading, Mr. Banks will introduce the poet and provide some light explication and analysis, with an emphasis on both form and meaning. Poetry is not a silent endeavor. It's meant to be heard, and more importantly, it's meant to be recited out loud. Join us now as poet Thomas Banks presents The Well-Read Poem.
Hello, and welcome to The Well-Read Poem. This is the beginning of our 19th season, and the theme that I have selected to build this season around is none other than death. And why did I do that? Well, I was looking out the window the other day. The weather was beautiful, kind of perfect late spring, early summer weather here in North Carolina, and I decided that it was almost too perfect and I needed something to darken it a bit. So I decided I was going to recite and give some commentary on a half a dozen poems dealing with what Henry James, the Anglo-American novelist, called on his deathbed the distinguished thing. And these poems are chosen from a variety of poets writing in a variety of time periods, languages, styles, and I wanted to give some impression of the breadth of ways and manners in which different poets in different centuries have addressed the subject of the end of our mortal existence here in this vale of tears. The first poem I selected is written by a poet that probably a lot of you haven't heard of before. He was a 17th century writer named William Browne, Browne spelled with an E on the end, and he was very prolific in his day. He wrote a long pastoral poem, I think it's 3 books long, practically an epic, which was not published until something like 200 years after his death. And nobody reads it, so we will leave that one alone. William Browne, if you look for him in, say, the Oxford Book of English Verse or some other, standard anthology, you will find almost certainly one poem and only one poem, and that is the one I'm going to read to you today, which is an epitaph written for the sister of one of England's greatest poets, the sister of Sir Philip Sidney, who was herself a much lauded, much written about, and something of a writer herself, the Dowager Countess of Pembroke, Lady Mary Herbert. And this poem, this poetic epitaph that William Browne has composed for her is all of 6 lines long. Poem's very short, epigrammatic, written in trochaic tetrameter. A trochee is, just a reminder if you are keeping up with your poetic meters, a trochee is kind of the opposite of a iamb. An iamb is a poetic foot which consists of an unstressed syllable followed by a stressed syllable. A trochee is the reverse of that. A trochee is a stressed syllable followed by an unstressed syllable. So a line of trochaic tetrameter would consist of 4 trochees, and the rhythm of it would be something like bum, 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 bum. So it's a fairly common lyric meter, very simple, kind of an insistent poetic meter, which lends itself to I think lends itself to a plaintive kind of poem like this. This poem has a wonderful sense of control. It's highly emotional, but also highly disciplined, and I admire it for that, for the amount of emotional energy that are concentrated in these 6 lines. A couple of points of diction a word appears in the first line, which is familiar to us, but our common understanding of it might be kind of misleading, because remember, this is the 17th century. Lady Mary died in 1621, and this is obviously an age before automobiles, yet he mentions a hearse, Hearse, at the end of line 1. What is a hearse here? Well, no, it's not the long sort of limousine-like car that transports a coffin to a cemetery in a funeral procession. No, here a hearse means a framework which would cover a coffin which was lying in state, a wood or perhaps a some other material framework on which you might place tapers, candles or something like that, as part of the presentation of a body when, the deceased is lying in state. So that's what the hearse is describing here. A little bit about Lady Mary's family. She was a member of the Sidney family by birth. I had mentioned that her brother, Philip Sidney, was a very notable poet of Shakespeare's day. Philip Sidney was not just a poet, but also a kind of the first literary critic of importance in English. He wrote a famous defense of poesy, which is sort of a justification for the poet's art in the face of hostile naysayers who believe that poetry is frivolous and morally irresponsible. So Philip Sidney, kind of following Aristotle and some other ancients in some regards, offered a very eloquent written defense of poetry as a justifiable art and a good use of an educated man and a Christian's time. So Philip Sidney, very important figure in the literature of the English Renaissance, sadly died when he was young. He was, I think he was about 30, if that. It was during an expedition to the Low Countries, what we would call the Netherlands and Belgium, during a war fought there between the Dutch independence forces and the armies of Spain. The Dutch at this time were subjects of Spain, and they were fighting for their independence against Philip II. The English lent some kind of half-hearted support to the Dutch rebels, and Philip Sidney was one of the officers in this expedition into the Low Countries, and he was mortally wounded in battle and died soon thereafter. Tragically, a great loss to English letters and English knighthood as well. So he and his sister were both among the well-known litterateurs of the court of Queen Elizabeth, and he dedicated one of his most popular works, the Countess of Pembroke's Arcadia, to his younger sister Mary, who is the Mary who is died and being celebrated here in William Browne's later poem. So she was something of a writer herself. She was a translator, a good linguist. She and her brother had that in common. Lady Mary translated a French tragedy about Mark Antony by the French tragedian Robert Garnier into English. So she made some contributions to the art of translating, verse translation in the Renaissance. And she married well, and she died at a more advanced age than her brother. She lived to be about 60. And this poem realizes her as a significant woman, not just a noble woman, but a woman who is both the subject of and a writer of verse in her own day. And yes, women wrote verse during the Renaissance too. Okay, so On the Dowager Countess of Pembroke by William Browne. Underneath this sable hearse lies the subject of all verse, Sidney's sister, Pembroke's mother, deaf, ere thou hast slain another fair and learned and good as she. Time shall throw a dart at thee. Another point of diction, which I should have mentioned before, dart here is not, he's not talking about the kind of dart that you throw at a board in a friendly competitive game when you're in a pub or something like that. It's been a long time. I don't remember the last time I was in a pub or a bar which had a dartboard in it. Seems kind of unfortunate. Maybe they're keeping up with that in the UK. That seems like more of an English sort of thing, but that's a tradition which we should keep up. Anyway, no, a dart here means a missile weapon, something more like a javelin or an arrow, something to kill someone with. So death here is apostrophized. Death here is addressed directly, even though, of course, he does not expect death to answer. And the sheer impossibility of taking away, from this earth. A woman is accomplished and wise and wonderful in all ways, as Lady Mary is stated with kind of a wonderful hyperbole, that death will never be able to take away so excellent a woman again, or if he ever does, aspire to, well, time will throw a dart at him first. So death itself will die before another person like Lady Mary could die, another person with her particular endowments of grace and beauty and intellectual accomplishment. So this is, like I said, it's a very disciplined poem. The last couple lines remind me a little bit of John Donne, his famous Death Be Not Proud, another probably better known poetic rebuke to death for all the greedy stealing that death does in this world where death has always been with us, but ought not to. Death is a result of the fall, and not just an enemy of man, but of God as well. And I think that something of the same resentment against death as a spoiler of so many, so much of experience down here, stealer away of so many wonderful things. I think that's nicely articulated by William Browne. So I'll read this one more time. On the Dowager Countess of Pembroke by William Browne. Underneath this sable hearse lies the subject of all verse, Sidney's sister, Pembroke's mother. Death, ere thou hast slain another, fair and learned and good as she, time shall throw a dart at thee. This has been the Well-Read Poem. Thank you for listening.
This has been The Well-Read Poem with poet Thomas Banks, brought to you by the Literary Life podcast. For show notes and the text of the poem, visit theliterary.life. To find out more about Thomas Banks and the poetry resources he offers, go to houseofhumaneletters.com. This podcast is patron-supported. Visit patreon.com/theliterarylife to find out how you can support this podcast and get additional bonus content, including monthly live poetry explications. If you enjoy this podcast, please subscribe, rate, and review. Thank you for listening.